What if history is not a clean line, past to present, but a damaged record, full of missing pages and mislabeled evidence? In 1961, a spark plug was reported inside a rock as if industrial machinery had been sealed into stone. In South Africa, metal-like spheres dated to nearly 3 billion years appear with grooves that look engineered. In Delhi, an iron pillar stands for more than 16 centuries with extraordinary resistance to corrosion. These are real places, real objects, real disputes. And if even one of them means what it seems to mean, what has the timeline of human knowledge been missing? Archaeology is often described as a science of the past, but in practice, it is a science of fragments. What survives is never the whole story, only what time, geology, and chance allow to remain. From these fragments, historians construct timelines, cultures, and technological progressions. Most of the time, the pieces fit well enough to form a coherent picture, but sometimes they do not. The discoveries examined in this film belong to that uncomfortable category. They are not legends or myths. They are objects, structures, and sites that have been physically documented, photographed, excavated, or studied. Yet each one carries a tension between what is observed and what is expected. In many cases, the mystery does not lie in the object itself, but in its context. A tool-like form embedded in stone, a geometrically precise object inside ancient rock layers, a structure whose material performance exceeds what is normally associated with its era. Context is everything in archaeology, and when context conflicts with established timelines, interpretation becomes fragile. It is important to state clearly what this film does not claim. These discoveries do not prove the existence of lost super-civilizations. They do not confirm time travel, nor do they overturn modern science. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and in several cases presented here, that evidence is incomplete, contested, or entirely missing. However, dismissing these cases outright creates a different problem. Science advances not only by confirming what it already knows, but by carefully examining anomalies, cases that resist easy explanation. Throughout history, many accepted truths began as uncomfortable outliers. Another common thread runs through all 10 discoveries: loss, lost techniques, lost documentation, lost chains of custody, lost cultural knowledge. Even when modern science offers plausible explanations, those explanations often reveal how much ancient knowledge was never written down, never standardized, or never preserved. What remains then is a narrow path between belief and skepticism. Lean too far in one direction and speculation replaces evidence. Lean too far in the other and meaningful questions are never asked at all. This film follows that narrow path. Each discovery will be examined through 3 lenses: the physical evidence, the mainstream scientific interpretation, and the unresolved questions that still remain. No final answers will be imposed. Instead, the goal is to understand why these cases continue to trouble our understanding of history, and why they refuse to disappear. Because sometimes the most important thing a discovery tells us is not what happened in the past, but how fragile our picture of the past truly is. 1. The spark plug inside the rock, California, 1961. The Mojave Desert in California is a place defined by exposure. Wind strips away soil, sun cracks stone. For rock collectors, it is also a place where ordinary-looking objects sometimes hide unexpected interiors. In 1961, 3 men searching for geodes picked up a stone that felt heavier than it should have been. Nothing about it appeared remarkable until they split it open. Inside was not crystal. Embedded at the center was a small cylindrical object made of metal and white ceramic. Its form was unmistakable. It closely resembled a spark plug, the kind used in early combustion engines. The shock was immediate. Spark plugs are a product of the industrial age, yet the stone surrounding the object was believed to be far older than modern technology. Early estimates suggested the rock could be hundreds of thousands of years old. If that context were correct, the implications would be profound. A manufactured machine component existing long before recorded industry, electricity, or internal combustion engines. Newspapers reported the discovery, photographs circulated, and the object became known as the Coso artifact. As attention grew, so did skepticism. Geologists pointed out that not all rocks form slowly over geological ages. Some mineral formations, known as concretions, can develop relatively quickly around existing objects, especially in environments rich in mineral-laden water. Under this explanation, a modern spark plug could become encased in hardened material that merely appears ancient. Further analysis identified similarities between the object and spark plugs manufactured in the early 20th century, particularly those used in mining equipment during the 1920s. This identification shifted the debate away from impossible timelines and toward geological misinterpretation. Yet the case did not end there. The original artifact was never preserved in a museum or subjected to long-term independent testing. Over time, it disappeared from public access. What remains are photographs, secondhand reports, and fragments of analysis. Without the physical object, definitive conclusions are no longer possible. This absence is what keeps the case alive. If the object was merely a modern spark plug encased by natural processes, its disappearance represents a lost opportunity for education and clarity. But if context was misunderstood or altered, the missing artifact prevents the question from ever being fully settled. The Kozo artifact does not prove that industrial technology existed in deep prehistory, but it exposes something equally unsettling: how easily a single missing object can fracture confidence in an explanation. And it raises a broader question that will echo through every discovery that follows. When context is uncertain, how much of history rests not on what we know, but on what we can no longer examine? 2. The 2.8 billion-year-old metallic spheres, South Africa. Deep within the ancient rock formations of South Africa, miners working in pyrophyllite deposits began encountering objects that seemed out of place. They were small, rounded, and unexpectedly precise. Some were smooth like polished stone. Others displayed shallow, parallel grooves that wrapped around their circumference with striking regularity. These objects became known as the Klerksdorp spheres. What immediately set them apart was not just their shape, but their geological context. The rock layers in which they were found are dated to approximately 2.8 billion years old, a time when Earth hosted only the simplest forms of life: no animals, no plants, no tools. No known intelligence capable of shaping matter. At first glance, the spheres appear almost manufactured. Their symmetry feels intentional. The grooves resemble machining marks. For many observers, this visual impression alone was enough to suggest artificial origin. Geologists, however, approach the objects from a different angle. Detailed studies showed that the spheres are composed of hematite or pyrite and formed through a process known as concretion. As mineral-rich fluids move through sedimentary rock, material can accumulate around a nucleus, growing outward in layers. Under certain conditions, this process naturally produces spherical forms. The grooves, according to mainstream explanations, are the result of differential growth along natural laminations in the host rock. As the surrounding material compresses and erodes unevenly, linear patterns can emerge that appear deliberate, even mechanical. Yet the controversy persists, not because the geological explanation is impossible, but because of how convincing the illusion is. Human perception is finely tuned to recognize patterns associated with tools and machines. When nature produces symmetry, it challenges a deeply ingrained assumption. That regularity implies intelligence. The Klerksdorp spheres exploit that bias perfectly. No evidence has shown that the spheres were modified, carved, or shaped by external tools. At the same time, no experiment has fully reproduced identical groove patterns under controlled conditions. As a result, the spheres occupy an uneasy space between explanation and doubt. They do not overturn geology, but they do expose a vulnerability in interpretation, how easily observation can drift into assumption. If objects this ancient can look engineered without being engineered at all, then a troubling question emerges. How many other technological mysteries are artifacts not of lost civilizations, but of the way the human mind reads intention into stone? 3. Chronovisor, the alleged time viewing machine. In the decades following World War II, Europe became a crossroads of scientific ambition, secrecy, and ideological tension. It was within this atmosphere that an extraordinary claim began to circulate quietly in Rome: the existence of a machine capable of observing the past. The device was called the chronovisor. According to the story, the chronovisor was developed by a small group of scientists, including physicists and engineers, with the support, or at least the awareness, of religious authorities. It was described as a large console, fitted with dials, screens, and antenna-like components. By tuning into residual electromagnetic traces left behind by historical events, the machine allegedly allowed users to witness moments long gone. Battles, speeches, ancient rituals. The central figure associated with the claim was Father Pellegrino Ernetti, a Benedictine monk with a background in musicology and science. In the 1970s, Ernetti stated that the chronovisor had been real, functional, and ultimately dismantled because of its dangerous implications. Some events, he warned, were not meant to be seen. No working device was ever produced. No independent verification was allowed. A photograph once claimed to depict an image captured by the chronovisor was later shown to closely resemble a modern sculpture, raising serious doubts about its authenticity. From a scientific standpoint, the problems are immediate. There is no known mechanism by which electromagnetic radiation from specific historical moments could be reconstructed with such precision. The theory contradicts fundamental principles of physics as currently understood. And yet, the chronovisor story refuses to disappear. Its persistence is the real mystery. Unlike physical artifacts embedded in rock, the chronovisor leaves behind only testimony, sketches, and rumor. But those rumors survive because they touch something deeper than evidence: the human desire to look back and know, to replace interpretation with direct observation. If such a device existed, it would not merely alter history, it would eliminate uncertainty itself. Perhaps that is why the story continues to resonate, not because it is proven, but because it represents the ultimate temptation, a machine that would end debate forever. And that raises a different kind of question. If the chronovisor never existed, why does the idea of it feel so believable? And what does that reveal about how uncomfortable we are with uncertainty in history? 4. The rust-free iron pillar of Delhi. At the center of an ancient complex in Delhi stands an iron column over 7 meters tall. It has been exposed to rain, heat, dust, and pollution for more than 16 centuries, and yet it shows almost no signs of rust. This alone would be remarkable, but what makes the pillar truly unsettling is that it was created long before modern metallurgy, stainless steel, or corrosion science existed. The pillar is believed to date back to the 4th or 5th century CE. Inscriptions on its surface praise a king and commemorate military victories, but they say nothing about how the column was made. The iron itself is unusually pure, containing very low levels of sulfur and manganese, while maintaining a high concentration of phosphorus. Modern analysis revealed something even more important. The pillar is protected by a thin, stable layer formed through long-term interaction between iron, phosphorus, and environmental moisture. This passive film prevents oxygen from penetrating deeper into the metal, dramatically slowing corrosion. From a scientific perspective, this does not violate known chemistry, but it does raise a more subtle problem. Producing iron with these exact properties requires precise control over smelting conditions, control that is difficult even with modern equipment. Engineers have attempted to replicate the pillar's corrosion resistance using traditional methods, but results remain inconsistent. This suggests that ancient metalworkers possessed not just skill, but process knowledge, an understanding of how materials behave over time. That knowledge was never written down. It was transmitted through practice, and eventually it vanished. The Iron Pillar of Delhi does not imply lost super technology. Instead, it points to something quieter and more disturbing: the disappearance of industrial wisdom. Civilizations do not only lose books and monuments, they lose techniques, they lose workflows, they lose ways of thinking embedded in craft rather than text. The pillar still stands because the material remembers what the culture forgot. And that leads to a critical question. If a society could master materials so precisely without leaving technical manuals behind, how many other advanced techniques may have existed, only to disappear without a trace when the people who practiced them were gone? 5. The Great Serpent Mound, Ohio, United States. From the ground, it is easy to miss. A low earthen ridge, rising gently from the surrounding landscape. But viewed from above, the shape becomes unmistakable. A massive serpent, its body coiling across a ridge for more than 400 meters, its jaws opening toward an oval form that appears to be an egg or the sun itself. This is the Great Serpent Mound of Ohio. Archaeological evidence suggests the mound was constructed around the late 11th century, likely by the Fort Ancient culture. No stone tools, no metal instruments, no written records explaining its purpose. Yet the structure displays a level of planning that demands attention. The serpent's head aligns with the sunset on the summer solstice. Other curves and bends correspond closely with lunar cycles and seasonal markers. These alignments are not perfect in the mathematical sense, but they are consistent enough to suggest deliberate observation of the sky over long periods of time. For a culture without modern surveying tools, such precision implies patience, continuity, and collective memory. The builders did not need advanced technology. They needed generations of careful watching. Scholars have debated the mound's purpose for decades. Some argue it was ceremonial, a symbolic representation tied to fertility, rebirth, or cosmology. Others suggest it functioned as a calendar, encoding seasonal changes in earth and shadow. There is no evidence it served as a burial site, which only deepens the mystery. The serpent itself is a powerful symbol found across cultures worldwide, often associated with time, cycles, and renewal. Whether this symbolism was intentional or coincidental remains unknown. What is certain is that the mound was not accidental. It required a shared vision and sustained effort over many years. And once built, its meaning depended entirely on cultural context that has since been lost. The Great Serpent Mound does not challenge physics or geology. It challenges something else: the assumption that complex knowledge requires complex tools. If ancient builders could encode astronomical understanding into Earth itself without leaving written explanation behind, then another question emerges. Chapa. How much sophisticated knowledge has been mistaken for simplicity, simply because it was expressed in soil rather than stone? 6. The London Mithraeum, hidden knowledge beneath a modern city. In 1954, while clearing bomb-damaged ground in the heart of London, construction workers uncovered the remains of a Roman temple buried beneath layers of modern history. The structure was identified as a Mithraeum, a sanctuary dedicated to Mithras, a deity worshipped through a secretive cult that spread across the Roman Empire. Unlike public Roman temples, Mithraea were enclosed, windowless spaces. Initiation rituals were restricted. Teachings were never written down for outsiders. What little is known comes from archaeology, symbolism, and fragmented inscriptions. Inside the London Mithraeum, archaeologists found altars, sculptures, and carved reliefs depicting Mithras slaying a bull, a scene rich with astronomical symbolism. Surrounding figures correspond to zodiac constellations, planetary deities, and cosmic cycles. The temple was not merely a place of worship, it was a space designed to convey structured knowledge. Some of the objects recovered sparked further debate. Certain tools and carved forms appeared oddly technical, geometrically precise, unfamiliar in function, and difficult to classify using standard Roman categories. While no artifact could be conclusively identified as advanced machinery, their presence suggested activities beyond simple ritual. Mainstream scholarship interprets these items symbolically. The Mithraic cult is thought to have encoded cosmological ideas into ritual practice, using objects as teaching instruments rather than tools. Knowledge was transmitted through participation, not text. Yet this interpretation leaves an uncomfortable gap. When a belief system deliberately avoids documentation, its intellectual content becomes invisible to history. Once the cult disappears, its internal logic goes with it. What remains are symbols without keys. The Mithraeum forces historians to confront a difficult reality. Not all knowledge was meant to be preserved. Some traditions were intentionally closed, experiential, and ephemeral. Archaeology can recover the stage, but not the script. The temple's rediscovery beneath a modern financial district adds another layer of irony. Above ground, data moves at the speed of light. Below it, a system of knowledge once existed that left no manuals, no diagrams, no explanations, only stone and silence. And this leads to a crucial question for the discoveries that follow. If entire systems of understanding can vanish without leaving written traces, how many artifacts from the past might be misunderstood, not because they are impossible, but because the knowledge needed to interpret them no longer exists? 7. The London Hammer, Texas, United States. In 1936, near the town of London in Texas, a couple walking along a rocky outcrop noticed something unusual protruding from a chunk of stone. Embedded within the rock was what appeared to be the wooden handle of a hammer. When the stone was broken open, the object inside was unmistakable: an iron hammerhead, still attached to a partially preserved wooden shaft. At first glance, the hammer looked ordinary. Its shape matched tools commonly used in the 19th century. What made it controversial was the stone encasing it. Some early reports claimed the surrounding rock was millions of years old, implying that the hammer existed long before modern humans. If true, such a claim would shatter the established timeline of human technology. Geologists, however, urged caution. Limestone and similar sedimentary rocks can harden rapidly under certain environmental conditions. Mineral-rich water can cement material around an object in decades rather than millennia. In this interpretation, the hammer could be relatively recent, with the rock forming around it long after its manufacture. Analysis of the hammerhead revealed iron purity consistent with known 19th century forging techniques. The wooden handle showed signs of mineralization, but partial fossilization does not necessarily indicate extreme age. It can occur in comparatively short time frames under favorable conditions. Despite these explanations, the case continues to circulate in popular literature. The reason is not the hammer itself, but the tension between appearance and process. To the untrained eye, stone implies deep time. To geology, stone does not always mean ancient. The London hammer demonstrates how easily context can mislead interpretation. A familiar object, once sealed inside hardened rock, can appear to violate history until the formation of that rock is properly understood. Yet even this explanation leaves one lingering discomfort. If geological processes can so convincingly imitate extreme age, how many other discoveries might feel impossible simply because we misunderstand the speed and variability of natural formation? And if that is true, where does genuine anomaly end and assumption begin? 8. The ancient fossilized shoe print, United States. Among the most provocative claims in alternative archaeology are reports of human footprints found in impossibly ancient rock layers. One of the most frequently cited examples is a mark discovered in sedimentary stone that appeared to resemble the sole of a modern shoe, complete with a defined heel and textured edge. To an untrained observer, the impression looks deliberate. The proportions feel familiar. The outline seems purposeful. And when such an image is paired with claims that the surrounding rock dates back hundreds of millions of years, the implication is immediate. Human presence far earlier than accepted history allows. Geologists and paleontologists approach such claims with a strict set of criteria. Genuine footprints must meet several conditions. They must show deformation consistent with soft sediment being compressed by weight. They must align with the stratigraphy of the surrounding layers, and they must display continuity, multiple tracks, directional movement, or associated biological traces. In this case, those criteria were not met. Closer examination revealed that the print resulted from a natural fracture process known as spalling. As sedimentary rock weathers, thin layers can detach along planes of weakness, creating shapes that closely resemble footprints, tools, or artificial impressions. These forms are visually compelling, but they lack the structural features required to confirm biological origin. This explanation does not rely on dismissal or ridicule. It relies on repeatable observation. Similar pseudo-footprints have been documented in multiple locations worldwide, often appearing where layered rock breaks cleanly along straight lines. What makes cases like this important is not that they disprove ancient humans, it is that they reveal how perception operates under uncertainty. The human brain is exceptionally skilled at recognizing familiar patterns, even when those patterns are accidental. Once a shape resembles something known, interpretation tends to follow instinct rather than evidence. This discovery highlights a critical boundary in archaeology, the difference between anomaly and artifact. One demands investigation, the other demands restraint. And that leads to a necessary question for the cases that follow. If some discoveries feel impossible because they resemble modern life too closely, how can researchers reliably distinguish between genuine evidence and the powerful illusion of recognition? 9. The Koso artifact revisited, a vanishing object. Not all historical mysteries endure because evidence contradicts explanation. Some endure because the evidence itself is no longer available. Few cases illustrate this problem more clearly than the Koso artifact. Following its discovery in 1961, the object believed to be a spark plug embedded in rock attracted attention from journalists, collectors, and amateur researchers. Photographs circulated. Short reports were written. But unlike many controversial artifacts, the Koso object was never placed under institutional control. It was not cataloged by a museum, secured by a university, or archived for long-term study. Over time, it simply disappeared. This absence fundamentally changes how the case must be evaluated. Without the physical object, no modern analysis can be performed, no isotopic testing, no microscopic examination of mineral growth, no verification of the surrounding material's age. Science depends on repeatability, and in this case, repeatability is impossible. Supporters of extraordinary interpretations argue that the disappearance itself is suspicious, that inconvenient evidence has a tendency to vanish. Skeptics counter that informal discoveries without proper documentation are inherently fragile, and that loss is an expected outcome, not a conspiracy. Both positions highlight the same weakness, a broken chain of custody. In archaeology, provenance matters as much as the object itself. Where an item is found, how it is handled, who documents it, and where it is stored all determine whether it can contribute meaningfully to knowledge. When any link in that chain fails, interpretation collapses into speculation. The Koso artifact's legacy is therefore not technological, but methodological. It demonstrates how quickly a discovery can slip from investigation into legend when documentation is incomplete. Even if the object was nothing more than a modern spark plug encased by natural processes, its loss ensured that doubt would persist. Certainty requires access. Without access, debate becomes permanent. This case forces a difficult acknowledgement. Not all mysteries survive because they are unsolved. Some survive because they can no longer be solved at all. And that leads directly to the final discovery, one that pushes this problem even further. What happens when a claim sounds technological, looks futuristic, but lacks the documentation required to decide whether it belongs to science or speculation? 10. The micrometal spirals of the Ural Mountains, Russia. In the early 1990s, reports emerged from the Ural Mountains in Russia describing a discovery that sounded strikingly modern. During geological surveys and mining operations, researchers claimed to have found microscopic spiral-shaped objects embedded in sediment layers. Some of these structures were measured in millimeters. Others were so small they could only be seen under powerful microscopes. What made the claim controversial was the material composition. The spirals were reportedly made from metals such as tungsten and molybdenum, elements with extremely high melting points, commonly associated with advanced industrial processes. According to initial reports, the sediment layers in which the objects were found dated back tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of years. If accurate, this would place the spirals far outside any known timeline of microengineering. Images of the objects showed remarkably regular spring-like forms. To many observers, they resembled miniature components, coils, resonators, or fragments of precision devices. The implication was clear and unsettling. Amit. However, as scrutiny increased, significant problems emerged. The discoveries were not published in widely recognized peer-reviewed journals. Access to original samples was limited. Detailed methodologies describing excavation, contamination control, and stratigraphic verification were often absent or inconsistent. Without standardized documentation, independent verification became impossible. Alternative explanations were proposed. Some scientists suggested the spirals could be industrial contamination, microscopic debris introduced by modern machinery. Others pointed to natural crystal growth processes capable of forming spiral-like geometries under specific conditions. None of these explanations could be decisively confirmed or rejected, largely because the primary evidence remained inaccessible. The Ural spirals represent a boundary case in archaeological mystery. They are not dismissed because they are impossible. They are unresolved because they cannot be properly tested. This distinction matters. Science does not reject claims because they are strange. It withholds acceptance when claims cannot be examined under controlled, repeatable conditions. The spirals sit precisely at that edge, where fascination outpaces verification. And in doing so, they highlight a final, sobering reality. Sometimes the greatest mystery is not whether something extraordinary happened in the past, but whether we preserved enough evidence to ever know. When history refuses to stay simple. 10 discoveries. 10 cases that, on the surface, seem to challenge the way history is normally told. Yet none of them, taken alone, is strong enough to rewrite the past. There is no single artifact here that proves lost super-civilizations, time travel, or technologies beyond known human capability. That is not the point, though. What these discoveries reveal is something more subtle and more unsettling. History is not a complete record. It is a reconstruction, assembled from fragments that survived erosion, collapse, neglect, and chance. What we call the past is shaped as much by what is missing as by what remains. In several cases, science offers reasonable explanations. Geological processes that mimic design, material science that explains durability, or natural pattern formation that resembles intention. In others, the evidence is simply too incomplete to decide anything at all. Objects vanish, documentation breaks down, context is lost. And when context is lost, certainty becomes impossible. This does not weaken science, it defines it. Science advances not by clinging to comforting narratives, but by acknowledging uncertainty and demanding better evidence. The danger lies not in asking difficult questions, but in answering them too quickly. At the same time, these cases warn against another kind of error, assuming that ancient people were always simple because their tools look simple to us. Knowledge does not only live in machines and textbooks, it lives in observation, repetition, craft, and memory. When those systems collapse, the knowledge they carried can disappear almost completely. Perhaps the most important lesson is this: anomalies do not mean history is wrong, they mean history is incomplete. The past does not owe us clarity, it offers clues, sometimes precise, sometimes misleading, sometimes silent. Our responsibility is not to force those clues into extremes, but to examine them carefully, patiently, and honestly. Because in the end, the greatest mystery may not be what ancient humans achieved, but how much of what they knew was lost before anyone thought to write it down.